Welcome to coffeeis.me podcast, where me means you, or more precisely, us. This is the show where your host, Valerian, without using any interrogation techniques, convinces coffee professionals to reveal their secrets to teach and inspire you to make better coffee and earn a few bucks on the side, if that's what you fancy. Let the show begin.
Hey Coffee is me, listeners. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today I have a really cool guest. He is Darren Spicer from a Clutch Coffee Bar. Hey Darren.
Hey, how are you, man?
I'm fine. You know, I never had anyone from coffee company which does drive-thrus. So I'm super excited about this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you having me on, and excited to talk shop.
Yeah, you know, I'm European. My heritage is European. I come from Europe, and drive-thrus there are not a big thing. And I have to admit, in front of the whole world, that I never did a drive-thru.
That's okay. I mean, I completely agree with you. I think culturally, there are things that are different from Europe and from the United States, and not in necessarily a good or bad way on either side. They're just different. And part of what we're aiming to do, America has an obsession to some degree with getting their food or beverages in a fast manner, not necessarily sitting down and enjoying it, but getting it on the go to wherever they're headed next. And so we aim to serve them a phenomenal product and experience in that short window of time to get them fueled up and going on their way.
The model sounds to me fascinating. It's not because I'm a European snob or whatever. That's why I didn't do that drive-through. It just didn't cross my mind. A, I always see them around, and B, they're a little bit intimidating for me because I never did them. You know, when you do something first time, it's like, oh, how do you do this? You know, but I'm sure if I do it first time, it will come naturally. And I remember when we had a before podcast call, I promised you that I'm going to do this, and I still plan to do this and make a little video maybe for the people how Valerian had his first drive-through experience. Thanks to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of get used to it over time, and it's really become the drive-through phenomenon, at least for coffee in the United States. The first ever drive-through coffee was in 1990 up in the Northwest in the Seattle, Portland areas, and it's just kind of evolved over time and become more and more popular to where people know they can go to McDonald's to get their hamburger, and now we've got coffee with Starbucks and other Dunkin' Donuts and other chains like that have really focused more on the beverage side and the coffee side, and we're trying to take it a step further and not just do coffee, but also juices, custom flavored teas, custom flavored energy drinks. A lot of things across the board where hopefully we have something for everybody.
Awesome. Thank you for telling us at least to me, what the drive-through really is, because I did not know it's such a recent phenomenon when it comes to coffee. That's a surprising info. Before we dive in to the tips and the business models, listeners would be really angry if I would not ask you about your first coffee experience. So what was your first coffee experience?
Okay, so first coffee experience, I think I got into it a little bit later than like maybe normal, but like I remember my first coffee experience, like actually coffee, not hot chocolate or something like that, I was 16. I was working at a grocery store, and I'd have to go outside and get the carts and bring them back in. And there was a little coffee kiosk inside the grocery store, and it was always busy. And there were these beautiful girls that worked there, and they had their tip jars were overflowing with cash tips that they had. And I'm pushing carts, and I'm walking by this, and I'm like, A, that looks like a lot of fun, more fun than what I'm doing. B, I need to like try something, right? And just check it out and see what it's all about. And so I after one of my shifts, like chatted with one of the girls that was working there, and I think I ordered, it was like a blended coffee. It was like a blended mocha, and it was delicious because it was full of sugar. And so I was just like, oh, this is kind of cool. And so then I I started, grabbing one before or after work on a fairly consistent basis, and then ultimately ended up, that was my first coffee job, was I ended up working for that company. And that was just such a great transition because I started making those tips myself, and I think I started making like twice as much as I was making pushing carts. So it was more fun and more lucrative, and that's how I kind of first got into it. And then and then just really enjoyed the people aspect. It was beyond that, beyond coffee for me. It was the people aspect in developing relationships with people.
This is awesome story. I love it. So, you got to coffee through pretty girls and bunch of cash.
I mean, yes, that's a good way to summarize it. As I said that out loud, I'm like, this is an interesting way it's unfolding. But that was, I mean, fairly accurate of like just walking by that and being like, man, that looks like a lot of fun. I want to check it out, and it ended up opening some doors for me.
Well, a true entrepreneur, sees the change and it's like, I want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. How did you get into doing Clutch Coffee Bar? Let's talk a little bit about your path to coffee. Well, we started obviously, and how did you get to the Clutch Coffee Bar?
Yeah, so I ended up working, like, the first drive-through coffee place I worked in. I was 18, in the hometown I grew up in Oregon, and had a great time. Enjoyed the process. It wasn't nearly as busy as it is now with what we see, but it was just a lot of fun, and we got, listen to music while you're working, and so I worked there through college. And there were some other locations in the town that I went to college in, and it was very flexible with school schedule, which was great. And so I worked there. After college, I got an adult job, and was working in professional sports, doing sports marketing. And I still had this passion for people and for coffee, that my cup wasn't being filled completely in this new market that I was in, and doing something different. And so coffee was kind of always in the back of my mind, kind of pulling me back. And I ended up getting back into it in my mid-20s, and I had wanted to franchise with this particular company I'd worked for that had a lot of drive-through locations, and they had certain requirements of what we had to do to become eligible. And I started checking off those boxes, and one of them was that you had to manage for a year, one of their locations. So grew myself into a spot where I became the manager of a new location. 9 months into fulfilling that 1 year requirement, they changed their model and said there's no more franchise opportunities, which was not ideal for me. And so I was just like, okay, well, that sucks. So I am going to go branch off and do my own. And so at the time I was managing a location, working 30 hours a week. And then I was also I transitioned into doing medical equipment sales, and I was doing that 40 hours a week on top. So I was putting in like 70-hour weeks. And I just said, okay, well, I'm gonna go start my own. So I just really, the moment that like Clutch came to be is it was on my birthday. I think it was 6 years ago, and I was sitting in my living room, and I'm like, I'm going to go on LegalZoom.com and create an LLC, call it Clutch Coffee LLC. And that, like, I'm going to spend, it was like, I don't know, $300. I'm like, I'm going to spend the money now and like commit myself to doing this. And so that was like the first token step of getting into it. And then from there, it was, formulating a business plan. Who are my business partners that I want to try to work with? What does this concept look like, and how can we bring it to reality? And so spent, the better part of 2 years working on that. And then Clutch officially came into existence in 2018.
Congrats on that. Wow. So basically, that previous company was training you to become their, well, kind of, they didn't know about it, but kind of training you to become great at what you do now and you wanted to work with them, but they could not give you the franchise. Was it a good decision for them to cancel the franchise?
You know what? I don't think that's for me to decide. I think there's pros and cons to any of those decisions. And I mean, they've continued to really thrive. At the time I was working there, I think they had about 300 locations and they've now got over 450. So they're growing immensely, and it's exciting to see because I have nothing but love for them because they gave me a lot of the foundation that I have. That's allowed me to have a good foundation to build, to build the house that I'm now working on. So um, I think if anything, it helped me to get to where I am now, right? Like if they had still done it, maybe I'd be a franchisee somewhere, and I'd have, a couple locations maybe. But the opportunity that I have now, we've got 5 locations now. Number 6 opens in May, and then 7 and 8 open in September, October. Like I don't think I'd have that upside right now if they had kept it the way it was. So for me, I'm appreciative. I think it's working out, just fine for them too. So.
Well, it sounds great, and I did not mean to criticize them. I was just more curious. What's your opinion about franchising? Like you said, there are advantages and disadvantages, and I guess one of the advantages is that you can control your quality. Because what happened to me that when I went to Subway sandwich some places, and they're very different. Like let's say here in Marion, we have these place which is very clean, very cool. But then I was in other state, and I was like, wait, this is Subway? It's super weird. It was all dirty and weird. So I guess you meet that kind of problem with the franchising, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that can definitely be one of you have less control over the brand, because franchisees they're not appointed necessarily by you, right? So you could have a situation where someone is really hungry and really lives out the brand values, and really sees what we're trying to build and is really bought in. And then you have other franchisees who may look at it more as an investment and just a place to park money versus really buying into the brand values. And so you kind of you are subject to a mixed bag, and it is harder to control, in addition to providing all of the resources and support that come with a franchise. So it's, for us now with Clutch, like we're not offering franchises. We've had a lot of people ask about it, and we want to have the right control over the brand at this stage, because our culture and how we build that is just, it's of the utmost importance. It makes a difference between, like you said, going into one Subway that might be highly functioning and then another one that looks really dirty. Like we want to be really, really consistent across the board with all of our locations.
Okay, so let's talk about drive-thrus. What if I want to start a drive-thru? What would you think would be the budget, ideal location, what kind of permits you need? How does it really work?
First thing you're looking at, like if you, let's there's a couple ways to approach this, but let's just pretend there's an existing building somewhere that may or may not already have a drive-through. If it does already have a drive-through, then you've got a drive-through permit. But if it doesn't, and let's say you're redeveloping a piece of property to add that, you have to go through the local municipality to get that approval, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into that aren't necessarily in your control, where the city is going to look at the traffic flow impact, right? If we add a drive-through here, how's it going to impact other businesses? Can cars get in and out efficiently, or is it going to create a backlog that spills out onto a bigger street that can create accidents or issues? And so there's a lot of red tape there. It can definitely be done. There's just a lot of red tape to make sure that you can get that permit. So that's one of the first things you look to secure, is like, okay, can we even have a drive-through permit here, right? And sometimes the city might say, no way, not doing it, like, sorry. And there are certain cities, at least in the United States, who won't even allow any drive-throughs at all. There's a town near one of our locations, and it's a small college town. They won't allow any drive-throughs in. So you kind of have to play with what you're dealt. But Getting that permit is important. So let's say that we were able to get that permit. Then it's making sure that you either the layout of the existing building or the building that you're about to construct has to be such that you can stack the proper amount of cars into the they call it the queue. So, at a drive-through, when it's the drive-through has to be able to accommodate most every city has their own requirement. Sometimes it's 6 cars, sometimes it's 8 cars, sometimes it's more, but you have to have a certain minimum number that allows them to stack cars in line, to receive your services. So, and for us, we place a pretty big premium on having a pretty long queue, because the shorter it is, if we become popular, which we have seen in opening new locations, you can create a pretty big jam where everybody wants to come at once before work, and your line can only hold a couple cars. You're kind of shit out of luck. You're in trouble. It limits your upside. So having that ability to stack cars is important. And then once you've got that drive-through permit, then it's having a building permit or a renovation permit from the city that says, yes, we are okay with this concept, and you can begin to transition this to become this type of a building. And some cities are very easy to work with. Other ones make there's a project we've been working on for 2 years, which is crazy, where we had to jump through all these hoops. It used to be a drive-through bank, just a drive-through bank, no walk-in, and we wanted to convert it, and it required a special exception permit that we had to go in front of the city and the mayor and the city councilman and present our case and why we wanted to be a new business there, and why this bank that was sitting vacant for 5 years should be revitalized and made into a beautiful looking clutch building. So lots of fun things on the back end that take a lot of time. But it's a fairly involved process. And then once you get through all those and you can actually start to renovate or build it, then it becomes more real and it's more exciting, and you can actually see it start to come to life.
The main tip would be, if I want to do this very fast, I just find some existing drive-through which is for sale, maybe like a food drive-through.
Yeah, for sale or for lease. So like a lot of times there'll be buildings that are available for lease, and that takes less capital, right? If you're going to buy it, you're going to have more capital ready to go. But if you're just leasing, and you're spending several $1,000s a month on that, that's a pretty economical way to go. You still have the renovation or the building cost, but in terms of the rent per month, leasing is a pretty good way to go.
I don't know why I didn't think of leasing. It's just like, buy it right away, buy it.
I mean, if it's a good deal, no. And then, when we got our first 2 locations open, the gentleman that owned the 2 buildings, it was actually another drive-through coffee concept, and he wanted to retire. And so part of the deal was we had to buy everything, right? We had to buy the 2 buildings, the business, the brand, which his brand had no value to us because we were going to have our own brand and call it Clutch. But we had to purchase everything. So we spent a little bit more than we wanted to get it going, but we got 2 locations that we were literally renovated in 90 days and opened.
I liked when you talked about that drive-through bank, and you said that you guys are working 2 years now on that project to make it work. So you probably know that there is some value there. So tell us, what do you think? What's an ideal location for a drive-through? What shall we look into when we are planning the location of the drive-through?
Yeah, great question. So I could get really, really deep on this, but I'll give you some high level things. They, like anything with real estate, location, right? Where is it? Is it in a busy area of town? Are there a lot of cars that drive by that street? If it's tucked away somewhere, less likely to be seen or noticed, or it might take a lot longer for people to know it's there. So visibility and a good amount of cars going by that location is really key. And then accessibility, is it easy to get in and out of, so that if you do become popular and busy, are you still going to deliver a good experience to your customers, or are they going to get frustrated because there's a traffic jam trying to get in or out, or whatever else is going on. So we look at traffic counts to see how many cars are going by there. We look at the average income in the area. There's making sure that we're not in a really, really low income area where maybe people don't have the expendable income to purchase a coffee, several times a week or a drink. And so those are kind of some of the initial things we look at. A city or an area that's growing is always a positive thing, as opposed to maybe if it's like a retirement community and maybe is kind of a little bit more stagnant, that might not be as attractive to us. But communities that are growing are a big focus for us as well.
Is there a difference between the purpose of that trip of those cars? Let's say whether they are in a rush, let's say on a highway, or whether they are kind of just cruising around, let's say in a I don't know, shopping mall or something. Is that important?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you're on a freeway or a highway or like near that where traffic is moving very, very fast, that's not very advantageous, because even if they saw you and wanted to stop, they're going pretty fast to where they can't make that stop in time. So definitely we look at areas where the speed limit isn't too high, where if someone was driving by and they saw it, they could still reasonably make a turn in to visit. Beyond that, in terms of like the purpose of the driver, like where are they going, what are they doing? We get a lot of people that come in before work. We get people that come on their break or their lunch, and people that come after work, and it's kind of throughout the day. And so, there's some research and data out there that kind of shows, there's a correlation of, a certain percentage where if you have X number of cars that are driving by that street every day, you can reasonably say that, 1 to 2% of those cars you could forecast would utilize, your business, your services. And so we kind of, that's a good starting point for us to see if the road's not very busy, it's not likely that we're going to entertain it. We really need to be in areas that are highly trafficked and that people are familiar with, right? People are familiar. Let's say there's another very popular restaurant or business that's nearby, or grocery store that's nearby, or a hospital, something like that. Those are good landmarks for us too, where where we put ourselves in a spot that people are very familiar with and frequent often.
Okay, so you mentioned that you used to work for a chain before, and then you started to do your own thing. So I'm sure that you learned a lot of very useful techniques and strategies from your previous employer. What do you think you decided to do differently and really worked for you?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. I think they did a lot of things that were great and that served as a good building block. I think there were other things that I felt could be improved upon, or more handcrafted. And one of the big things is not only just providing opportunities for employment for people, but also encouraging and pushing people to pursue what they're passionate about. And so, not so much of like, maybe they're passionate about coffee and people and they love Clutch and they want to work here for a long time, and I want to provide those opportunities. I think that'd be great. But also, like, let's say they're really passionate about becoming a photographer, or they're going to school for nursing. Like, great. What can we do as a company to help them pursue those things, right? If they're really into photography, can we have them coordinate with our brand photographer and get them some exposure to what a photo shoot or a product shoot looks like? Can they get some experience there? If they really want to get into nursing, right, and we have a regular customer who works at a hospital or as a nurse, like, how can we make that introduction and that connection to give them an opportunity to pursue that? So it's, as much as I'd want to say, oh yeah, everyone should work at Clutch for the rest of the time, like, that's also not realistic. And I want to empower and coach and support people to pursue what they're passionate about as well, and use Clutch as a vehicle to do that. So that's something that I was really passionate about, that that I thought could be improved upon and tangibly improved upon, and so that was a big thing. And then also just kind of expanding our offerings and having more products across the board to kind of hit every segment of people, right? So it's not just coffee. When people say, "Oh, I don't drink coffee," that's okay. That's fine. We have custom flavored teas and juices and energy drinks and milkshakes and et cetera. So doing different things like that to differentiate ourselves, I think is has been important for us.
I loved when you started to answer the question, and you did not start with coffee. You started with people. What do you think are the kind of very basic things which make drive-through a good drive-through? Let's say any drive-through, not your philosophy, but any drive-through. What are the basic things which make it a good one?
Good operational flow internally. So, do you have a good system internally that allows you to efficiently serve customers? If they're coming through a drive-through, it's reasonable to deduct that they want a fast experience, right? If they had time to come in and sit down, they would. They're going through the drive-through, they are doing other things or need to get somewhere and are trying to get their food or beverage and go. So I think your operations internally have to be very sound, where you have good systems that allow you to move quickly and efficiently. So operations goes kind of hand in hand with speed, right? I mean, if you've got to be staffed appropriately. If you're understaffed, which I see all the time at places, when you're understaffed, on the surface level, they might think they're saving money on payroll, but if you're limiting how many customers you can serve because you don't have enough manpower, you're really losing. So those are a couple critical things. To me, customer service, so many drive-throughs have just become transactional, and this is something that we're passionate about with delivering that experience, because I truly believe in building those relationships to where if you have those relationships, it expands beyond coffee, and it's like, I know these people, they know me. When I pull up, that's kind of a cool thing with what we do at Clutch. A lot of our regular employees, they know our regular customers, and so they might see, Kevin turns into the line, and they know that he's going to get a small hot white mocha, and they already start making it before he even pulls up, right? Like that service doesn't happen very often, and people, it makes people feel special. It really does. So I think operations and speed, and then that guest experience, that customer experience, and then the last thing is, like, you got to have a quality product, right? I mean, if you're serving something that's shitty, people won't come back. Like, so you've got to have a really quality product, and if you can win on all of those levels, then you've got something that's got potential.
So I agree with you, and I liked also that in previous answer you mentioned that you are not only selling coffee but other beverages, and we're definitely going to talk about it. But before that, let's talk about your coffee. So what kind of coffee do you guys offer, and how the people react to that?
Yeah, so we use an award-winning roaster out of Washington State. I will give them major credit. The name is the name of the roaster is Dillanos. It's spelled Dillanos. They are fantastic. They make an incredibly quality, consistent product. We use an espresso blend. It is a medium blend, if you will. And all of our coffee drinks are espresso based. We don't do any drip coffee. We want coffee to be made in a premium way, and we want it to be on demand, meaning when you order it, that's when we pull those shots of espresso. It's not something that's been sitting around for 5 or 10 minutes. It's literally made as you order it. It is literally custom crafted. And so we use a custom blend from them, the Clutch blend, if you will. And they facilitate all that. Right now we're doing, I was trying to think. I think we're doing like almost 2,000 pounds a week of coffee across all of our locations. So we're busy. And so everything is espresso based.
So let me just repeat that you're doing 2,000 pounds a week. That means 8,000 pounds a month, correct? So if I do a math, my first question would be, why don't you roast it yourself?
That's fair question. And the short list of answers to that is, one, we at this point in time, like that's not our expertise or our forte, and so we want to leave that to the professionals who know what they're doing. I think too, if we were to do it, it's a pretty significant financial investment to set up your own. It's not just purchasing equipment to roast, but you've got to set up a facility. And then do you have a facility that can produce what you need now, but also be set up to grow, to scale, right? When we add on 3 more locations in the next 5 months, can it handle all of those? And is it ready? So it's a pretty significant undertaking, and you really would have to have somebody who's very knowledgeable and very experienced, because I think roasting is a combination of art and science, and someone who is very in tune with that to oversee that. So it's not for the scale that we need, it's not a simple, like, oh yeah, let's do this. Like it's a pretty involved decision. And so for us right now, we're trying to focus on being really good at what we are good at, our core competency, which is drive-through and the retail drive-through. Roasting that becomes more of a wholesale business. It would help us become vertically integrated, but it's just not the right time at this moment to focus on that.
It's amazing. I mean, first of all, I apologize to Delanos. My goal was not to steal a customer or convince the customers to start to roast. I was just really curious about this, because nowadays the trend is that more and more small cafes roast their own coffee, and they use either co-roasting spaces, because that's very affordable. You basically rent the time on a roaster, or they even invest in their small operations. Let's say my company in Europe is a wholesaler, so we don't want to do cafes, we don't want to do drive-thrus. What we want to do is sell to these cafes and sell to these drive-thrus, because what we want to do is roast coffee. We want to perfect our technique. We want to make sure that we are finding the best coffee beans. We want to make sure that we find the best coffee beans for you, because maybe you have different needs for quality or for budget than, let's say, somebody else. So that's what we want to do. So I applaud you. That's great. I mean, you do you, and you do it amazingly, and we do us, which is hopefully amazing, right? So, or in your case, Delanos. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We want to focus on what we're good at right now.
Okay, let's go back to your non-coffee beverages, and I'm really curious about this. What do you guys sell, and which are your best sellers?
So we sell categorically. We also sell custom infused energy drinks, which are a very popular beverage for us. Those energy drinks can be in. So imagine taking a Red Bull energy drink and infusing that with any fruit flavor that you want. So blue raspberry, watermelon, strawberry, orange, or any combination. We've got about 15 fruit flavors. That's a very popular thing, because there isn't any other drive-through that is doing custom flavored energy drinks. That's a very popular one, and it just allows complete customization. If you come up with a really good combination that you want, and you want to name it whatever it is that that you like, you can do that. Same thing with our iced teas. So we have black and green tea, and we use a high quality tea brand called Harney and Sons, and we utilize that as our base, and then you can add a flavor to that. So like, for instance, earlier today I had one of our signature flavors is it's called Sensational Strawberry, but it is a green tea with a little bit of strawberry flavor, and then a splash of coconut milk or almond milk, or whatever you'd like in there. And so it gives it's a really cool color to it, but also the flavor is fantastic. So those are really fun from a customization standpoint. Almost everything on the menu is customizable, right? So shakes, if you wanted to do a shake, we've got probably about 25 flavors actually, between fruit flavors and then non-fruit flavors. So those can be fully customized. Smoothies, we have mango, peach, strawberry, and wildberry, and then a frozen lemonade as well, which is really good. Also mixed as well with vodka at home. But But like those are some I would say are very popular things beyond coffee are the energy drinks and the smoothies for sure.
Customizable means that I come to your place and I make any combination I want. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's super hard, isn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, in terms of it looks like it on the surface level, but because we have certain operational rules, so to speak, of like how much flavor goes in let's say you're going to get a iced tea. We have certain rules for how much flavor goes in a small, a medium, and a large. So regardless of whether you put one flavor or two or five, it uses the same rules. So it doesn't become sweeter if you want to put two flavors in there instead of one, the amount of flavor you'll get of each one is cumulatively will equal what our rule is for that small size. So as long as our employees are trained correctly and know the recipes and the rules with those recipes, it makes it pretty easy. You could put 10 flavors in there and we know how to do it.
So which beverages win overall when it comes to sales? Is it the coffee-based beverages or these fruity things?
Yeah, top five drinks for us are going to be in no particular order are going to be our caramel macchiato, which is one of our signature coffees, and then an Americano, which is a traditional regular coffee, espresso based coffee, and then our flavored energy drinks and smoothies. Those are all going to usually be at the top of the list. There's also one other one that's growing quite a bit in popularity, and it's called the Muscle Mocha. And this was a drink we developed based on a request from my wife, who said, "I'm tired of drinking a coffee and a protein drink after going to the gym. Find a way to combine those two things." And so we infuse those, and now we have a protein packed, low sugar muscle mocha, which is delicious and I'm literally drinking one right now, which is delicious in flavor and has good macros for people that are
Hmm.
health conscious.
You are an excellent husband, Darren. So congrats on that. It sounds good. I would definitely try it. I'm not a crazy exercise person, but I do exercise, obviously. But I'm not using these shakes. I never really tried them, so it intrigues me. And it's also surprising to me that they are definitely in the top 5 of your best-selling beverages. But I'll go back to the question again because I want to know also which ones are the most profitable. So if somebody says like I don't want to do everything, but I do want to, let's say I want to do only 3 most profitable, which do you think are the most profitable?
So there's a couple ways to answer that. So
Mhm.
from a margin perspective,
Mhm.
like a regular Americano, which is espresso and water, that's the only ingredients that go in there. Maybe you add a little bit of cream or sugar, but that from a margin perspective is the best margin because it's the simplest thing. The worst margin is probably the smoothies. Those are very expensive to make. However, the price of smoothies is significantly greater than a regular Americano. So, bottom line, dollar for dollar or pound for pound, I would rather sell more smoothies than Americanos. If I could sell the same number of both of those, I would rather sell that lowest margin product because it actually contributes more to the bottom line, profit wise, than just because the price is so much higher.
Awesome. Do you guys offer food?
Yeah, we have a limited food menu. Everything is pre-packaged and ready to go. So meaning like we don't prepare any food. Everything is already in its own individual package. So we have some muffins that we carry, banana nut, blueberry, and chocolate chip. We have like a marshmallow Rice Krispie treat. We've got some individual unit, like the little oatmeals that you could get, like that you just add hot water or milk to, that are grab and go. And then we have a couple of like for the health conscious crowd, we have a couple protein bars that are that are, delicious, but a little bit better on the nutrition content. So not a huge offering, but enough that you could get, breakfast or lunch and a snack, like your drink and a snack to get you through the afternoon.
You are talking
About them with a little bit less love.
compared to what with beverage.
Not as passionate about a product. Well, yeah, it's like, I mean, went through a major exercise to find the right products that were sustainable and that were quality. Cause there's a lot of big national products that I could carry, but the quality was pretty crap. So like, I just didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be a quality product. So, being that that's not something that we craft internally and it's a third party, vendor, yeah, I'm a little less passionate about it, but still very passionate about the level of quality.
How important are they when it comes to your profitability of your location?
Yeah, I mean, food is probably like 9 to 10% of our total sales. We don't have crazy margins on them, and food in general is less cost than, or less of a retail price than a lot of our drinks are. So it contributes a little bit, but it's not anything that's earth shattering. We just want to make sure that we have something that's quality, that someone wouldn't have to go somewhere else. If they literally wanted something to eat, we have something that they wouldn't have to go somewhere else to fulfill that.
Nowadays, you probably visit also other cafes. And I was just curious, when you go sit down to a cafe and look around with your professional eyes, what are the most common mistakes you think they are doing? Or let's say, if not mistakes, what do you think they could do better?
Yeah. Oh man, this is a great question. So, and the number one thing the top two things I look at, number one is the service level. Like, what is that service, right? And you get a very quick insight into like how well or how poorly they were trained, or how much that brand emphasizes the customer experience. So, are you greeted right away? Is that experience pleasant, or is it just like, hey, welcome, what can I get for you? Like monotone. So that's one thing I look at right away. And then the second thing is the operational flow and how they're set up. And I see this a lot at places where they bottleneck in the wrong places because they just don't know, or they don't care. Let's say there is two people taking orders at two cash registers at the front. And then I see this at Starbucks a lot, I'm gonna be honest. Two people taking drinks at the front, and then one person on the espresso bar actually making the drinks. And so you're taking in twice as many orders, and it's all funneling to one person who's like trying to keep up, and they just get jammed. Versus number one, my first suggestion would be like staff it appropriately to where everybody has a role and they can do that role in unison with each other, where the flow is consistent. And so like having two people make those drinks would be more helpful. But if you couldn't staff up more, switch that process and have one person take orders and two people make those drinks. So that way that when we have people staffed on our espresso machines, we have there's two people per bar, and they each, there's like an imaginary line down the middle, and they each have roles and responsibilities of what they need to do to build that drink together. So that flow goes a lot faster. So then in theory there, you take that order, they get started on that order right away, and there's two people making that. So your wait time from placing that order until picking it up is reduced if you're operating the right way. So those are the two biggest things that I see, like that I either get impressed or like severely disappointed.
So when you were talking about the efficiency of making beverages, I'm just curious, what kind of machines do you use in your places?
Yeah, so I mean, our espresso machines are pretty much top of the line. We use a brand; they're handmade in Italy. The brand is La Marzocco, and they're not cheap. You get like a 3-group machine, which means it's got three heads on it, so you can in theory pull 3 double shots of espresso simultaneously. One of those machines is going to be $15,000, and we usually put at least 2 of those in every location. So we use they're expensive, but they're incredible quality and very reliable, and just they're fantastic machines. So we use those, and then we have a station for a blender station where we have a series of blenders for making the smoothies and the shakes and things of that nature as well. And we're about to start exploring nitro infused coffee, which is become a very popular thing in the United States, and looking at how we can implement that into our
Let me
offerings.
know, because that's what I'm looking into, but in Europe. Anyhow, but what I was going to point out here, I was curious about your machines because Starbucks is using super automatics right now, and you guys are still going the group machines. That's really cool. That's fancy.
Yeah. So here's the biggest if you want to compare those two, here's the biggest deal with that. Super automatic is like you could teach a monkey how to use it, right? Like press a button, it's like, yeah, press a button and get your espresso shots, right? Very easy. It's controlled. There's an automatic cutoff on milk temperature when you're steaming milk and you hit a certain temperature. There's a cutoff for that. And so it's got more quality control around it. It means you don't have to train as intensely. The downside is those super automatics can only pull so many shots at a time. And there's usually only, they can pull like, I think it can pull like this ones at Starbucks can pull like maybe 2 double shots, right? But if you really get into a rhythm and you have a 3 group machine, or we even have some 4 group machines where, I mean, back when I used to be fast doing this, like I could pull a full rack. I could pull 4 double shots of espresso, like manually pull those in less than 15 seconds. So then you start talking about volume, and some of our large espresso drinks, our standard large coffee comes with 4 shots of espresso. We have some amped drinks that have 6 shots in a large. So you need to use all 3 or 4 of those heads, right? To get that's just for one drink. What if they ordered 2? Like, so that's where the super automatic has the downside is you can't go as fast and do the production. If you have a quieter, slower cafe and it's easy, like no big deal. But if you're trying to really do volume, or set yourself up to do volume, it sounds counterintuitive to say you're manually doing the work versus pressing a button, but you actually can go.
This is awesome. This is exactly opposite what I heard before, and what you explained, it makes totally sense. So usually people say that we use super automatics because we want to make it the whole flow efficient. But I get what you say. I did play with super automatics a little bit. I mean, I don't mind if the cafe using them and the business model is efficiency, if that's what they want. But as you explained, actually, that's not true. That's awesome.
Yeah, it just comes down to how much you train. I mean, if you train people that can be really fast, pulling that, like, because when we get busy, it's not uncommon for us to do $600 or $700 worth of business in an hour. And so like, you've got to be very fast. Like you've got to be able to, you've got to be able to move, right? You're talking doing more than $10 a minute in drinks. So a super automatic it will slow you down, or you need more of them. And then you're talking about more capital cost than, if you got to have 3 of those in there, space wise, it takes up more space. Again, pros and cons. It depends. I'm totally cool if Starbucks is my main competition. They want to keep using that, totally fine by me, because we'll run circles around them. So
you are totally right. I saw this in one cafe in Napa when they, I think it was a bakery. Skipping my name. They serve amazing coffee by Equator, and they went with a super automatic way. They have super fancy super automatic machine which makes high quality espresso, but because of their volume, they had to buy 3 of them, and that was crazy expensive. La Marzocco will seem to you like peanuts, compared to that.
Yeah. It just comes down to like a philosophy thing, I think, really. So
I love that you talked about training, because I didn't plan to do this. Usually I do this when I have somebody on a show who subscribed to Coffee Pro, and I ask them about the testimonial, basically how did they like Coffee Pro. But in this case, I just mentioned that on coffeecourses.com, we have also training for people who wants to learn how to pull shots and do basic espresso. So if you are a cafe or just a person who wants to learn this, that's cool. We have some companies who actually use this as a basic training for their baristas. So go ahead, coffeecourses.com. Wow, thank you for a chance to plug.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if I leave this
Absolutely.
in. I was like, yeah, cool, why not? We'll see. Anyhow, okay.
Last time when we talked together, we also talked about that you love to visit Europe. You had few trips there. And we had this short discussion about the drive-thrus and European culture. So what do you think about that? Does drive-thru have a chance in Europe? And let's talk about coffee drive-thru, because there are drive-thrus in Europe, like McDonald's does that and everybody does that. But I'm curious about coffee drive-thru.
That's a fantastic question. I could see it going both ways, right? I think culturally in Europe, there is a premium placed on sitting down and enjoying coffee as a social entity and as a social gathering sometimes, or maybe sitting down by yourself, but taking time to enjoy that versus, using that as like that's the focus of what I'm going to do versus I need to get a coffee to go do something else. So I can see, it's been 30 years since drive-through coffee started in the United States. I could see it catching on there in certain areas, maybe in progressive cities where there is a lot of movement and people on the go. I also could see it hitting because it is just very culturally different, right? I mean, and it may be, whoever does the first true experiment there to see, they're either gonna really thrive or they're gonna completely swing and miss. I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's interesting to think about. I think there are certain pockets that it probably would be received, and maybe it shifts part of the culture. But I know that coffee is such an integral part of the culture that I think it's a pretty monumental task to look to try to change that completely, where, the United States is, everybody's focused on doing something or going somewhere. And so we've just become very accustomed to let me grab my coffee, let me grab my food, whatever. Now, if there are already, if there's drive-through food there, then I would like to think coffee isn't far behind. But I also have to believe that Starbucks as a global brand has done a lot more market research than we have. And there's probably a reason that they haven't really hit, doing drive-throughs there in Europe, based on what information they have.
Mm-hmm.
So normally I usually ask the $10,000 question, that, what kind of business you would start with $10,000. But I have a different question for you. Selfishly, because I'm a person who is not using drive-thru, so I don't know how they should look like, I would ask you, how do you think a European drive-thru should look like? Or if you would start tomorrow a European drive-thru, how would it look like?
I think a hybrid would be preferable, that doesn't just go to strictly drive-through, but has a combination of a walk-in space, so where people could sit down actually in a cafe, but also happens to have the drive-through convenience, and maybe even have some outdoor seating if there's space, but something that approaches the concept in a way that isn't so foreign that people are scared to try it, or they just don't. It's just they don't know what to do with it. Where you can have a great atmosphere inside for people to still sit down like they traditionally have, but also, if you are in a hurry, hey, we have a lane here that you can drive through and order from. I think that would be the big thing, to kind of ease into that and put your toes in the water to see how is this going to be received, right? And then that way, if the drive-through thrives, then great, you're in a good spot. But if it doesn't, for whatever reason, then you still have that walk-in segment where you're not going to, have to really start thinking about, do we need to close this down at some point?
Do you think that in Europe they should be in different places, like in the United States, like when it comes to location?
In terms of like how busy the area is, or like the types of, you could make an argument for putting them near where the fast food, like if there are fast food drive-through food places now in Europe, that would probably be my starting point, to put them near that, because those companies, whether that's McDonald's or any other big chain, have done more research to say this is where we think this has the best chance of succeeding. And then you also have the muscle memory of people who know that that's actually a drive-through, and then, okay, this concept isn't that foreign. Now I can get my food here and my coffee here and be on my way. So I would, if I was going to go in, I would look to do it in areas where there already is existing drive-through, because those are there for a reason, and the market research they've done is likely going to be greater than something I might come up with, on my own.
Interesting. I definitely will entertain this idea in my head. I like to think about things like this. But yeah, if there is somebody who's listening to this podcast and you guys know of a coffee drive-through in Europe, let us know where they are. I'm really curious. It's a very interesting concept. Where do you see Clutch in 10 years? What do you guys want to achieve?
Yeah, so I mean, 10 years from now, we want to build a regional brand that has several hundred locations. So that's really our focus right now, is trying to set ourselves up to have several hundred locations, and really have a strong brand that people know and are familiar with and love.
What's your personal end goal? Is it something you want to retire with or sell later, or what's your personal goal?
Man, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm passionate about. I really enjoy building things and building brands and businesses as well. So, I have aspirations in addition to Clutch of wanting to consult and help other small business owners get started from the ground up, and then also to coach, like hopefully be able to coach my kids in athletics or things of that nature. So those are a couple other things that I'm passionate about to do in addition to Clutch. But in terms of where the path takes me with Clutch, I think we're just scratching the surface. We don't even know what our own ceiling is yet, and it'll just be exciting to see where we go.
Are you doing those consultations right now?
No. I mean, I've had a couple people indirectly ask me for thoughts or ideas on their, they want to do something similar in a different geography or something of that nature. But in terms of like formal, no, all my focus and effort has been on Clutch.
Okay, because I thought that if you are, then here is your place to promote yourself. So, but
yeah. I mean, eventually, I'm like, oh, it's got a good ring to it, Clutch Consulting. But I gotta continue to prove it myself first, right? Otherwise, they're like, who's this guy? But yeah, it's something that I'm passionate about, to help other small business owners, optimize their own business or start something, from the ground up.
There's so many consultants in the industry who never really went through the trenches. And not only in our industry, in general, like they don't go through trenches, they don't know how to do this, but they consult. I always wondered where they get the know-how, from books or whatever, or how they really consult. So I appreciate you that you are willing to go through the trenches.
Yeah, I want to live it out to be able to tell, the good, the bad, everything in between, and share that experience. So it's not like, well, I read about this, or it's like I've done it, for better or for worse. So yeah, it's sharing that knowledge and experience, I think will be fun too.
So Darren, I tortured you here for an hour approximately. Thank you so much for all your very useful inputs. I think it's only fair that if you have a questions for me, you go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing I'm always just curious about is what inspired you to start your your podcast with Coffee Is Me. What inspired that, and what do you enjoy the most about it?
Huh. Okay. I think I talked about it before a little bit, but it was selfish. I was starting a coffee brand called Unleash Coffee 5 years ago, and I already had my European brand, but obviously doing business in the United States is very different than in Europe. And I was like, well, how can I learn fastest to make business in the United States, or how can I get the most tips? So I decided to interview businesses like you and get your ideas on that.
You're self-aware. I like it.
Well, that's how it started, but later, obviously, it grew up into something else, because suddenly I had something to say, and I could share some opinions, and just became a very good conversation with super interesting people, which otherwise I might not meet, so it became something else. Yeah. And partly it's also the fact that, I do work on online education on coffeecourses.com. I do some consultancy myself, and I really feel that if you want to do that, you really need to know what you're talking about. So I went to the trenches. I was there, and I'm still there with my European brand, and I'm not willing to give it up. And doing the work, so I can talk about things with knowledge, right?
I love it. I think that's awesome, and it's great to be able to share some very valuable information and have great conversations for your listeners.
Thank you again for this amazing talk. I think you are very organized with your thoughts. So in this 1 hour, you got us so much to think about and so much useful information that all we have to do is act on it. And also, can you mention where can people find you?
Yeah. So our website is clutchcoffeebar.com. And then our social media handles are at Clutch Coffee Bar. We are on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. That kind of covers everything. Gives you all. The website has information on our story, where we're at, where we're going, all the merchandise and all the fun stuff there. And we do monthly subscriptions as well for whole bean or ground coffee if someone wants to enjoy making it at home and they want a quality coffee that's better than whatever they're using now. We have that as well.
Well, thank you so much, and bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.